Now to tonight's special report on medicinal cannabis. Easy legal access to it has long been important to people with a serious or chronic illness, and very slowly politicians have been working to lift restrictions. It's estimated that up to 250,000 Australians could benefit from access to the drug. So far, only about 3,000 applications have been approved. But that's hiding the true figures. Experts suggest at least 100,000 people may already be obtaining medicinal cannabis illegally. Now, a major legal industry has started to take root here, with licensed businesses looking to sell not only to Australians, but to growing markets overseas. Our reporter, Richard Willingham, went to meet some of those who are part of this controversial industry.
Cooper Freeman used to suffer frequent epileptic seizures. Conventional medicine was not working. Then his family got hold of medicinal cannabis.
Did the product change my life? Did it change Cooper's? You'll never ever be able to put into words what it did for us. All right, handsome, come on.
Recreational marijuana is illegal, but some doctors are allowed to access medicinal cannabis for patients with certain conditions like severe epilepsy through a special access scheme. The Therapeutic Goods Administration has not yet approved it for mainstream use. Joe Freeman has approval, but it wasn't always that way.
I then had to go to Nimbin and get product from the Nimbin people, which is sort of a last resort.
Clinical trials are underway, a policy the Australian Medical Association supports.
Let's look at where it has a role to play. It's not a panacea, it's not going to be the cure-all that some people think it will be, but we need to understand exactly what its potential role is.
Those trials are raising hopes for patients and business.
I think this year is going to be quite a big year for the cannabis industry. For most of last year it was pretty difficult for patients to get a hold of it, but in the last few months of last year we were getting around 300 or 400 patients approved every month, and that's a real step up.
We're on our way to a secret site in Melbourne where cannabis is legally grown. At the moment, nearly all medicinal cannabis is imported, but that's starting to change.
So this will go through an extraction and purification process and be used as a medicine for paediatric epilepsy cohort patients in Australia.
The Cann Group were the first to be granted a licence. Chief Executive Peter Crock says the market is slowly growing.
It'll start to filter through, I think, but it's still, I think, some time off before we see large volumes available for Australian patients.
Access to markets overseas will help foster a viable domestic industry.
We don't have enough demand and it would be too difficult to set up a new industry with such a low patient base. That's going to change over time, but it'll change quicker with access to more product, and that's why exports are so important.
This is greenhouse number one.
Cannatrek has set up this research facility in Brisbane. It is also building a large greenhouse in northern Victoria in a bid to tap into a future market.
It could well be up to 20% of pain management medicines, so that's quite significant.
The Victorian government wants the state to be the cannabis bowl of Australia, with another business, Kronos, setting up its HQ in Melbourne.
We are obviously renowned for our agricultural products, but we're also a gateway to Asia, and recently some Asian countries have legalised medicinal cannabis use, including Thailand. So this is a very exciting industry.
Analyst Matthias Smith says the local market could pay dividends.
There are over 100,000 people in Australia currently using cannabis for genuine medical purposes. My personal view is that is an underestimate of the potential market, which I think is probably more like 250 to 500,000 people.
The overwhelming view is Australia is taking the right steps to establishing an industry, but frustration remains that it's still too difficult to get hold of the medicine. And then there's the cost.
The costs are so staggering that for the average person it's just not achievable.
The cost for the Freeman family reached $50,000 in 1 year alone.
Slowly the supply chain will become a reality to bring affordable medicine to patients.
For now, imported medicinal cannabis remains under lock and key at a select group of pharmacies. But the first green shoots of local crops are starting to sprout. Richard Willingham, ABC News.